What if everything you've been told about building wealth and designing your future has been a carefully constructed lie? What if the very path you're walking right now, the safe job, the traditional timeline, the socially acceptable dreams, is actually the biggest obstacle standing between you and the extraordinary life you're capable of creating? I'm about to share something that might completely shift how you think about money, success, and your own potential. Has this ever happened to you? You wake up one morning, look at your life, and realize you're living someone else's script instead of writing your own story? You're following expectations that were handed down to you by family, society, or culture, but deep inside, there's this nagging feeling that you were meant for something bigger, something more aligned with who you really are. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might surprise you, and it could be the turning point that changes everything for you. We're diving deep into the revolutionary concepts from Design Your Future, See Your Wealth Grow Effortlessly, an audiobook that's been quietly transforming lives from Denver to Phoenix, from corporate boardrooms to entrepreneurial startups. The truth is, most people are trapped in what I call the myth of inevitable life. They believe their circumstances are fixed, their path is predetermined, and their financial future is largely out of their control. They accept limitations without questioning them. They follow the well-worn trail made by millions before them, not because it's the best route, but because it feels like the only route. But here's what the wealthy understand that others don't. Your current life is not your only option. Take Sarah Martinez, a 35-year-old entrepreneur from Austin, who was stuck in this exact trap just 3 years ago. She was following all the traditional rules, climbing the corporate ladder, saving in her 401k, living the responsible life everyone expected of her. But something inside her was screaming that there had to be more. The moment she discovered the power of intentional vision, and I mean truly intentional, not just wishful thinking, everything changed. She stopped living reactively and started designing proactively. What Sarah learned, and what I'm about to share with you, is that vision isn't some fluffy motivational concept. It's a strategic weapon. It's the difference between building wealth by accident and building wealth by design. It's the difference between hoping things work out and engineering them to work out. You see, the world has trained us to think small, to be realistic, to lower our expectations. We've been conditioned to believe that dreaming big is naive and that playing it safe is wise. But what if I told you that playing it safe is actually the riskiest thing you can do? What if the very limitations you've accepted as truth are actually just inherited beliefs that have nothing to do with your real potential? The people who create extraordinary wealth, both financial and personal, understand something fundamental that others miss. They know that abundance isn't about having more stuff. It's about becoming more. They know that fortune doesn't just follow hard work. It follows bold, intentional design. They've cracked the code on turning vision into strategy, dreams into systems, and potential into profit. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is what most wealth-building advice completely misses. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is what most wealth-building advice completely misses. The transformation doesn't happen by trying to fix who you are today. It happens when you start making decisions as the person you're becoming tomorrow. This is the hidden truth that separates those who struggle from those who soar. Think about it for a moment. Every action you take right now is either reinforcing your old identity or building your future one. When you check your phone instead of working on your business, when you choose comfort over growth, when you make decisions based on fear rather than vision, you're voting for the person you've always been. But when you start asking yourself, what would the successful version of me do in this situation? Everything shifts. I've witnessed this transformation countless times. People who were stuck for years suddenly accelerate their progress, not because they got smarter or luckier, but because they stopped trying to improve their current self and started embodying their future self. It's like having a GPS for personal growth. Instead of wandering aimlessly, you have a clear direction. This leads us to something even more profound, something that cuts through all the noise and gets to the heart of why some people build lasting wealth while others chase empty victories. There's a massive difference between building success on values, versus building it on vanity. Most people get this completely backwards. Vanity tells you to look successful even when you're struggling behind the scenes. It pushes you to chase trends, accumulate followers, and perform a life instead of living one. Vanity is addictive because it gives you quick hits of validation, but it's also exhausting because it's never enough. You're constantly performing, constantly comparing, constantly needing more applause to feel worthy. Values, on the other hand, are quiet but powerful. They don't need an audience. They don't require validation. When you build your wealth on values, integrity, service, authenticity, long-term thinking, you create something that can't be shaken by market fluctuations or social media algorithms. You sleep well at night because your success isn't dependent on other people's opinions. The journey becomes completely different when you choose substance over appearance. Instead of asking, "How can I look successful?" you start asking, "How can I become genuinely valuable?" Instead of chasing what impresses others, you focus on what truly matters to you. The decisions become clearer, the path becomes straighter, and the results become more meaningful. Behind the scenes of every person who's built real, lasting wealth, you'll find this principle at work. They may have moments of doubt, setbacks, even failures, but their foundation remains solid because it's built on something deeper than external validation. They've discovered that the most magnetic people aren't those trying to impress everyone. They're those who are genuinely aligned with their purpose. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because there's a specific framework that takes this understanding and turns it into a practical system you can implement immediately. It's about designing your life in a way that makes abundance feel effortless, not because you're avoiding work, but because you're working in harmony with natural principles that multiply your efforts. Write in the comments, "I choose values over vanity," if this perspective resonates with you. This framework starts with a fundamental shift in how you approach every decision in your life. Instead of operating from scarcity, that anxious feeling that there's never enough time, money, or opportunities, you begin designing from abundance. This isn't positive thinking or naive optimism. This is strategic thinking based on a profound understanding of how wealth actually flows. Scarcity thinking makes you hoard opportunities, clutch onto relationships that drain you, and say yes to everything because you're terrified of missing out. It turns you into a reactive person, always defending what little you have instead of creating more. But abundance thinking does something remarkable. It makes you magnetic. When you operate from the belief that there's more than enough to go around, you start making decisions that attract exactly what you need. I've seen this transformation happen in real time. People who shift from scarcity to abundance suddenly find themselves in better partnerships, presented with opportunities they never noticed before, and making bolder decisions that actually pay off. It's not magic, it's alignment. When you're not operating from fear, you can see possibilities that panic blinds you to. Here's where it gets really interesting, and this revelation completely changed how I approach growth. Most people think progress means adding more clients, more projects, more income streams, more activities. But the most successful people I know have mastered something entirely different. They've learned that real elevation comes through elimination. This goes against everything we've been taught about productivity and success. We're conditioned to believe that busy equals important, that saying yes to everything shows dedication, that more is always better. But this addiction to addition is actually what keeps most people stuck. They're drowning in commitments that don't move the needle, relationships that drain their energy, and habits that worked 5 years ago but are now holding them back. The hidden truth behind every major breakthrough is subtraction. When you audit your life honestly, your calendar, your commitments, your relationships, your daily routines, you discover that success isn't buried under more stuff. It's hiding underneath all the things that no longer serve you. Every great builder understands this principle. You can't elevate while carrying everything. Think about the most peaceful, productive, and profitable people you know. They're not the ones juggling 20 projects and attending every networking event. They're the ones who've become masters at saying no. They've learned to protect their energy like it's their most valuable asset because it is. They understand that every yes to something unimportant is a no to something transformational. This process of intentional subtraction creates space. Space to think, space to create, space to notice opportunities that were always there but hidden beneath the noise. When you remove the distractions, the essential becomes obvious. When you clear the clutter, your vision sharpens. When you stop trying to do everything, you finally have the bandwidth to do the right things excellently. Behind the scenes of every person who seems to effortlessly attract success, you'll find this principle at work. They're not superhuman. They're selective. They've learned that power comes not from how much you can handle, but from how strategically you can choose what to handle. They've discovered that the path to more often runs directly through less. The impact of this mindset shift ripples through every area of your life. Your relationships deepen when you stop collecting acquaintances and start investing in real connections. Your income grows when you stop chasing every opportunity and start focusing on the ones that align with your strengths. Your peace increases when you stop trying to please everyone and start honoring your own values. Now, this brings us to something even more powerful, a system that takes this understanding and transforms it into a daily practice that compounds your results over time. It's about building your life in a way that works for you even when you're not actively working. Write in the comments, less is more, if you're ready to start eliminating instead of just adding. This system is what I call life architecture, and it's the difference between people who achieve success once and those who sustain it for decades. Most people rely on motivation and willpower to drive their results, but here's the revelation that changed everything for me. Willpower is finite, but systems are infinite. Think about the most successful people you admire. Behind the scenes, their lives run on systems that make good decisions automatic. They don't wake up every morning wondering whether they should work out, what to eat, or how to prioritize their day. They've designed their environment and routines so that the right choices become the easy choices. They've removed the friction between intention and action. This is what separates amateur hour from professional mastery. Amateurs depend on feeling inspired. Professionals depend on having systems that work regardless of how they feel. When you design structured approaches to your work, health, relationships, and finances, you eliminate decision fatigue. You stop wasting precious mental energy on repetitive choices and free up that bandwidth for creativity, strategy, and growth. The transformation happens when you realize that excellence isn't about heroic efforts or perfect days. It's about building rhythms that compound over time. When your morning routine supports your energy, your workspace eliminates distractions, and your financial habits automatically build wealth. Success becomes a natural byproduct rather than a constant struggle. But here's where most people get this wrong, and understanding this distinction will save you years of spinning your wheels. They confuse having big dreams with having a real strategy. They create vision boards and set ambitious goals, but they never bridge the gap between the dream and the daily grind. This is where the magic happens, in the space between dreaming in outcomes and thinking in processes. Your outcomes should absolutely be bold, specific, and inspiring. You should have a clear picture of the life you want to build, the impact you want to make, the freedom you want to create. But once that vision is locked in, your focus must shift entirely to the processes that will make it real. The daily habits, the weekly reviews, the monthly adjustments. These are the building blocks of transformation. I've watched countless people sabotage their own success by staying stuck in outcome obsession. They check their bank account every day, obsess over social media metrics, and panic when results don't come fast enough. Meanwhile, the people who actually reach their ambitious goals are focused on something completely different. They're tracking their inputs, not their outputs. They're measuring consistency, not just results. This mindset shift is profound because it puts the power back in your hands. You can't control when opportunities arrive or how quickly the market responds to your work, but you can absolutely control whether you show up consistently, whether you follow your system, whether you take the next right step. When you make your daily process sacred, the outcomes become inevitable. The journey of building lasting wealth isn't about luck or timing or having all the right connections, though those things can help. It's about creating systems that work so well they seem almost boring. It's about making the fundamentals so automatic that you can focus your creative energy on innovation, relationships, and strategic thinking rather than basic execution. Behind every overnight success story, you'll find years of systematic preparation. The impact you see is just the visible tip of an iceberg built through countless small, consistent actions. The revelation here is that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary results not through extraordinary effort, but through extraordinarily consistent systems. Now, this brings us to a crucial decision point that will determine whether you actually implement what you're learning or whether this remains just interesting information. There's a specific way to translate these insights into a personal blueprint that works for your unique situation and goals. Write in the comments, "Systems over willpower," if you're ready to start building instead of just dreaming. This blueprint starts with a profound shift in perspective that most people never make. Instead of thinking about legacy as something you build at the end of your career, you start recognizing that your legacy is being written right now, with every decision you make, every conversation you have, every action you take today. This isn't abstract philosophy. It's practical strategy that changes how you approach everything. When you realize that legacy building happens in the present moment, your entire decision-making framework transforms. You stop asking, "What's the quickest way to make money?" and start asking, "What's the most meaningful way to create value?" You stop optimizing for short-term wins and start building for long-term impact. The ripple effects of this mindset shift are extraordinary because it connects your daily actions to something bigger than immediate gratification. Behind the scenes of every person who's built something truly lasting, you'll find this understanding at work. They're not just accumulating wealth. Why? They're stewarding it. They're not just building businesses. They're creating platforms for impact. They're not just chasing success. They're designing significance. This perspective gives weight to everything they do because they know their work matters beyond their own lifetime. The transformation happens when you stop separating your personal goals from your contribution to the world. Instead of thinking, "I need to get successful so I can eventually make a difference," you start thinking, "I'm going to make a difference as I become successful." This integration creates a kind of fuel that motivation alone can't provide. It gives you staying power when things get difficult because you're connected to something larger than yourself. But here's where most people get stuck, and understanding this will save you from years of spinning your wheels. They create inspiring vision boards, write beautiful mission statements, and dream big dreams, but they never translate that inspiration into actionable strategy. There's a massive gap between being inspired and being effective, and bridging that gap is where real progress begins. The revelation that changed everything for me was realizing that vision boards are just the starting point, not the destination. They're meant to spark emotion and clarify direction, but if you stop there, you're still living in fantasy. The magic happens when you evolve from inspiration to implementation, from dreaming to designing, from hoping to engineering your outcomes. This evolution requires you to take your beautiful, inspiring vision and break it down into measurable milestones, specific timelines, and concrete action steps. You need to ask uncomfortable questions like, "What exactly needs to happen in the next 90 days to move this forward?" And, "What skills do I need to develop to make this realistic?" And, "What would this look like if I were actually serious about making it happen?" The journey from vision to reality is where most dreams die, not because they weren't good enough, but because they weren't strategic enough. People fall in love with the outcome but never fall in love with the process. They want the destination but resist mapping the route. They're inspired by the possibility, but intimidated by the practicality. Strategic mapping forces you to confront the real work required to turn your dreams into achievements. It's less glamorous than vision boarding, but it's infinitely more powerful because it creates a bridge between where you are and where you want to be. When you have a clear map, every day becomes purposeful, every action becomes intentional, every decision becomes aligned. The impact of this shift is immediate and profound. You stop feeling like you're wandering in the wilderness of good intentions and start feeling like you're walking a clear path toward a specific destination. The anxiety of uncertainty gets replaced by the confidence of having a plan. Now, this brings us to something that might surprise you about how the most successful people actually think about taking action, especially when they don't feel completely ready, or when the path ahead isn't perfectly clear. Write in the comments, "Legacy starts today," if you're committed to building something that matters beyond yourself. What might surprise you is that the people who achieve the most remarkable results don't wait until they feel completely prepared. They've discovered a hidden truth that changes everything. Fortune doesn't follow the cautious, it follows the bold. This isn't about being reckless or making impulsive decisions. It's about understanding that calculated boldness creates opportunities that endless preparation never will. Most people are stuck in preparation mode, waiting until they have all the answers, all the skills, all the confidence before they make their move. But here's the revelation that separates builders from dreamers. You don't get confident by thinking about it. You get confident by doing it. Every bold action you take becomes evidence that you're capable of more than you previously believed. Behind the scenes of every breakthrough story, you'll find moments where someone decided to act despite feeling uncertain. They sent the email before they felt ready. They launched the product before it was perfect. They had the difficult conversation before they knew exactly what to say. This willingness to move before feeling fully prepared is what creates momentum, and momentum is what turns possibilities into realities. The transformation happens when you realize that hesitation isn't protecting you from failure, it's guaranteeing mediocrity. While you're waiting for the perfect moment, someone else with less experience but more courage is taking the opportunities you're planning to pursue someday. The market doesn't wait for you to feel ready. Your dreams don't pause while you collect more credentials. This mindset shift leads to something even more powerful, a philosophy that completely changed how I approach personal growth and wealth building. Most people think they need to become the person they want to be before they can start building the life they want to have. But this backwards thinking keeps them trapped in endless self-improvement without any real-world application. The truth is, you build while you become. You don't wait until you're fully formed to start creating your future. You grow through engagement with the process, not through perfecting yourself in isolation. Every time you take action aligned with your vision, you're not just moving toward your goals, you're becoming the person capable of achieving them. This is where the magic happens, in the space between where you are and where you're going. You don't need to bridge that gap through thinking or planning or waiting. You bridge it through building. Every project you start, every conversation you initiate, every risk you take is simultaneously creating your external results and developing your internal capacity. The journey of transformation isn't about becoming someone new. It's about discovering who you already are when you strip away the fear, the excuses, and the limiting beliefs. The version of you that's capable of creating wealth, building influence, and making an impact already exists. It's not hiding behind more education, or better timing, or perfect conditions. It's hiding behind the decision to start before you feel ready. This realization removes the pressure to have everything figured out before you begin. You can be a beginner and a builder at the same time. You can be learning and leading simultaneously. You can be growing and giving in the same moment. The people who understand this principle accelerate their progress because they're not waiting for permission from their own insecurities. The impact of this shift is immediate and profound. You stop being paralyzed by imposter syndrome because you're not pretending to be something you're not. You're becoming something you're choosing to be. You stop being overwhelmed by the gap between your current reality and your future vision because you're actively closing that gap through action. Now, this brings us to something fundamental about how wealth actually works, something that most people completely misunderstand about the relationship between money and value creation. Write in the comments, "I'm building while becoming," if you're ready to stop waiting for permission from your own fears. This fundamental misunderstanding about wealth is what keeps most people trapped in financial mediocrity their entire lives. They treat wealth like it's something you're either born with or you're not, like it's determined by luck, inheritance, or being in the right place at the right time. But here's the revelation that changes everything. Wealth is a skill set, not a status symbol. Just like learning to play piano or speak a foreign language, wealth creation is a combination of mindset, decision-making patterns, and long-term vision that can be developed through practice, study, and consistent application. The people who build lasting financial freedom aren't genetically different from you. They've simply learned a set of principles and practiced them until they became second nature. This transformation in thinking is profound because it puts the power back in your hands. You're not waiting to be chosen or discovered or lucky. You're developing capabilities. You're building mental frameworks. You're practicing skills that compound over time. When you approach wealth this way, every financial decision becomes a learning opportunity. Every setback becomes feedback, and every small win becomes evidence that you're on the right path. Behind the scenes of every person who seems to effortlessly attract money, you'll find someone who's studied the game. They understand how value flows, how markets work, how to position themselves strategically. They've learned to think in terms of systems rather than just transactions, relationships rather than just revenue, and long-term impact rather than just short-term gains. But here's where most people get completely off track, and understanding this distinction will save you years of frustration. They confuse working hard with creating value. They think if they just put in more hours, more effort, more hustle, the money will automatically follow. But the economy doesn't pay for effort. It pays for results. It pays for problems solved, needs met, and value delivered. The journey from struggling financially to thriving financially isn't about working harder. It's about becoming more valuable. Money flows to those who solve meaningful problems and create measurable outcomes. When you shift your focus from, "How can I make more money?" to, "How can I create more value?" everything changes. The money becomes a natural byproduct of the impact you're making rather than the primary goal you're chasing. This mindset shift is revolutionary because it takes the desperation out of wealth building. You're no longer scrambling for opportunities or competing for scraps. You're creating opportunities by becoming someone worth paying attention to, someone worth investing in, someone worth referring to others. The market starts responding to you differently because you're showing up differently. The impact of this approach extends far beyond just financial results. When you focus on value creation, your work becomes more fulfilling because it's connected to something meaningful. Your relationships improve because you're approaching them from service rather than need. Your confidence grows because it's based on your ability to deliver results rather than just your ability to talk about them. The transformation happens when you realize that your income is simply a reflection of the value you bring to the marketplace. If you want to elevate your income, you need to elevate your value. This might mean developing new skills, solving bigger problems, serving higher-level clients, or finding ways to scale your impact. But the focus is always on the value first, with the money following naturally. Now this brings us to something that most people never consider, but that makes all the difference in how quickly you can scale your influence and your income. It's about understanding the difference between adding more and multiplying what you already have. Write in the comments, "Value first, money follows," if you're ready to shift from chasing income to creating impact. This difference between adding and multiplying is what separates those who build sustainable wealth from those who burn themselves out chasing it. Most people think growth means doing more. More clients, more projects, more hours, more hustle. But there's a ceiling to this approach because you're still trading time for money, and time is the one resource you can never get more of. The transformation happens when you shift from addition thinking to multiplication thinking. Instead of asking, "How can I work more hours?" you start asking, "How can I make each hour more valuable?" Instead of trying to serve more clients personally, you create systems that deliver value at scale. This isn't about working less. It's about working smarter through leverage and strategic design. Behind the scenes of every person who seems to effortlessly scale their income, you'll find this principle. At work, they've learned to multiply their efforts through automation, delegation, and strategic partnerships. They build once and benefit repeatedly. They create systems that work while they sleep. They develop intellectual property that generates value independent of their daily presence. The journey from linear growth to exponential growth requires you to think like an architect rather than a laborer. You're not just building with your hands. You're designing blueprints that others can execute. You're not just solving problems individually. You're creating solutions that can be replicated and scaled. This shift in thinking opens up possibilities that addition-based approaches never could. But here's something most people overlook entirely, and it might be the most valuable asset you're not actively building. While everyone's focused on products, services, and business models, the smartest wealth builders are investing heavily in something that works for them around the clock, creates opportunities they never have to chase, and generates trust that money simply can't buy. Your personal brand isn't just marketing, it's strategic infrastructure. It's the difference between being a commodity and being irreplaceable. When you're known for something specific and valuable, opportunities find you instead of you having to hunt for them. People refer you without being asked. Trust gets established before conversations even begin. The revelation that changed everything for me was realizing that your reputation is working for you or against you every single day. Whether you're managing it intentionally or not, every interaction, every piece of content you create, every way you show up in the world is either building your brand or diluting it. The question isn't whether you have a personal brand. The question is whether it's helping you or hurting you. This strategic approach to reputation building creates what I call compound credibility. Each genuine interaction builds on the last. Each valuable contribution reinforces your positioning. Each aligned action strengthens the story people tell about you when you're not in the room. Over time, this creates a gravitational pull that attracts exactly the people, opportunities, and resources you need. The impact of having a strong personal brand extends far beyond just business success. It gives you leverage in negotiations because people already trust your judgment. It opens doors to speaking opportunities, partnerships, and collaborations that would never be available otherwise. It creates a protective barrier during difficult times because your reputation becomes your currency. The transformation happens when you stop thinking about building a brand and start thinking about becoming someone worth knowing. You focus on consistently delivering value, being genuinely helpful, and showing up with integrity. The brand becomes a natural expression of who you are, rather than a performance you're putting on. Now, this brings us to something that might be the most overlooked factor in long-term success. Something that most people only think about after they've already hit major obstacles. Write in the comments, multiplication mindset, if you're ready to stop trading time for money and start building systems that scale. This overlooked factor is something that most people only realize after they've struggled alone for years, wondering why progress feels so difficult and why opportunities seem to pass them by. The hidden truth is that your network isn't just a nice addition to your success strategy, it's actually your growth engine. It's what accelerates your progress, compresses time, and creates opportunities that individual effort alone never could. Most people treat networking like collecting business cards or adding connections on social media. But real networking is about building authentic relationships based on mutual value. It's about becoming someone others want to support, collaborate with, and refer to opportunities. When you approach relationships this way, something magical happens. Your individual efforts get amplified exponentially through the collective power of your network. Behind the scenes of every major breakthrough, you'll find a conversation, an introduction, or a collaboration that made the difference. The right relationship can replace months of outreach. The right introduction can open doors that credentials alone never could. The right partnership can give you access to audiences, expertise, and resources that would take years to build independently. The transformation happens when you realize that success isn't a solo journey. Every person who's built something significant has been supported by others who believed in their vision, shared their knowledge, or opened their networks. But this support doesn't happen accidentally. It's cultivated through genuine service, consistent value creation, and authentic relationship, building over time. But here's what separates those who ultimately win from those who start strong but fade away, and this might be the most important distinction we'll discuss. It's not about who's the most talented, the most connected, or the most innovative. It's about who has the staying power to outlast the inevitable difficulties that come with building anything meaningful. Resilience is the ultimate competitive advantage because it's what allows you to keep going when motivation fails, when strategies don't work as planned, And when the world seems determined to test your commitment, most people give up not because they lack ability, but because they underestimate how long transformation actually takes and how much persistence is required to break through to the next level. The journey of building wealth, influence, or any form of lasting success is not a straight line. There will be setbacks, disappointments, and moments when you question whether you're on the right path. The people who ultimately succeed aren't those who avoid these challenges. They're the ones who develop the emotional strength to navigate through them without losing sight of their vision. This resilience isn't about toughing it out or pushing through at all costs. It's about developing the wisdom to know when to pivot, when to persist, and when to pause for strategic reflection. It's about maintaining faith in your long-term vision while staying flexible in your short-term tactics. It's about building the emotional infrastructure that allows you to handle uncertainty without panicking. The impact of developing real resilience extends far beyond just surviving difficult times. It changes how you approach risk, how you handle feedback, and how you respond to opportunities. When you know you can handle whatever comes your way, you start making bolder decisions, taking bigger risks, and pursuing more ambitious goals. The transformation happens when you stop seeing obstacles as evidence that you should quit, and start seeing them as evidence that you're attempting something worthwhile. Every person who's built something remarkable has faced moments when giving up felt reasonable, even logical. What separated them wasn't the absence of doubt, but the presence of resilience. Now, this brings us to something that ties all of these concepts together and shows you how to create a life where financial success, personal fulfillment, and meaningful contribution all work in harmony rather than competing against each other. Write in the comments, "I'm building resilience," if you're committed to developing the staying power that outlasts temporary setbacks. This harmony between financial success, personal fulfillment, and lifestyle freedom is what most people never achieve, because they're taught to pursue these things separately, often believing they have to sacrifice one for another. They think they need to choose between making money and finding meaning, between building wealth and having freedom, between being successful and being happy. But this either-or thinking is what keeps people trapped in lives that feel incomplete. The revelation that changes everything is realizing that money, meaning, and freedom aren't competing forces. They're complementary elements that can and should work together. When you align these three dimensions, something extraordinary happens. Work stops feeling like a burden and starts feeling like an expression of your purpose. Income becomes a natural byproduct of meaningful contribution rather than something you have to chase desperately. Behind the scenes of every person who seems to effortlessly attract both wealth and fulfillment, you'll find someone who's learned to integrate these elements rather than balance them. They've designed their lives so that making money feels meaningful. Their meaningful work creates freedom, and their freedom enables them to serve at an even higher level. This integration creates a sustainable cycle that energizes rather than depletes. The transformation happens when you stop seeing financial goals as separate from personal values. Instead of building a business that drains your soul but pays well, you create something that expresses your authentic gifts while solving real problems. Instead of postponing happiness until you're financially free, you design daily work that fulfills you while building toward long-term freedom. But here's where most people make a critical mistake that undermines everything they're trying to build, and understanding this will save you from years of burnout and frustration. They think growth means scaling everything, expanding in all directions, saying yes to every opportunity that looks profitable. But this scattered approach to expansion actually creates complexity, stress, and ultimately less freedom than they had before. The journey to sustainable success requires you to be ruthlessly selective about what you choose to grow. Not every opportunity deserves your attention. Not every income stream aligns with your values. Not every growth strategy serves your long-term vision. The people who build lasting wealth and maintain their sanity understand that growth should amplify what matters most, not multiply what matters least. This selective scaling approach is profound because it protects your integrity while accelerating your progress. When you only grow things that align with your core values, your expansion feels energizing rather than exhausting. You're not constantly fighting internal conflict between what you're building and who you want to be. Every step forward reinforces your identity rather than compromising it. The impact of this aligned approach extends far beyond just business growth. It affects your relationships, your health, your peace of mind, and your ability to maintain momentum over time. When growth serves your values rather than violating them, you can sustain effort over decades, rather than burning out after months or years. The transformation happens when you realize that saying no to good opportunities creates space for great ones. When you stop trying to be everything to everyone and start being exceptional at what matters most to you. When you choose depth over breadth, quality over quantity, alignment over expansion for its own sake. This decision to scale selectively requires courage, because it means walking away from immediate income to preserve long-term integrity. It means disappointing some people to serve the right people exceptionally well. It means trusting that focused effort will yield better results than scattered activity, even when that's not immediately obvious. Now, this brings us to perhaps the most important question of all, one that will determine whether everything we've discussed becomes just interesting information or actually transforms how you live and build your future. Write in the comments, aligned growth only, if you're ready to stop scaling everything and start scaling what matters. This question forces you to confront the most uncomfortable truth about success and regret. The question is simple, but devastating. Are you going to live rich and die empty, or are you going to carry your best work, your deepest insights, your greatest contributions to the grave? Most people spend their entire lives holding back, waiting for permission, waiting for the perfect moment, waiting until they feel completely ready to share what's really inside them. The revelation that changes everything is understanding that maximum fulfillment doesn't come from accumulating more stuff, more status, or more security. It comes from fully expressing your potential, from pouring out everything you have to give, from leaving nothing unexpressed when your time is complete. This isn't about being reckless with your life. It's about being intentional with your gifts, behind the scenes of every person who lived a life worth remembering. You'll find someone who chose courage over comfort, contribution over collection, and impact over image. They didn't wait until they felt worthy of their own dreams. They didn't postpone their vision until circumstances were perfect. They understood that their potential wasn't meant to be hoarded but shared, not meant to be protected but expressed. The transformation happens when you realize that playing small doesn't serve anyone, including yourself. The world needs what you have to offer, but it can't benefit from your gifts if you keep them locked away out of fear or insecurity. Every day you hold back is a day those gifts can't create the impact they were designed to make. But here's something most people never learn, something that could have changed their entire financial trajectory if someone had taught them when they were younger. The education system teaches us history, science, and literature, but it completely fails to teach us the most practical skill we'll need as adults: financial intelligence. This isn't just about balancing a checkbook, it's about understanding how money actually works, how wealth is created, and how to make strategic decisions that compound over time. Take Michael Chen, a 28-year-old from Portland who discovered this gap in his education when he realized he was making decent money, but had no idea how to make that money work for him. He was living paycheck to paycheck, despite earning more than his parents ever did. The moment he decided to treat financial literacy as a core skill rather than something he'd figure out eventually, his entire trajectory changed. The journey from financial confusion to financial confidence isn't about becoming an expert overnight. It's about developing the foundational knowledge that allows you to make informed decisions about saving, investing, debt management, and wealth building. This knowledge becomes the difference between working for money your entire life and eventually having money work for you. What Michael discovered, and what transformed his approach to building wealth, was that financial intelligence isn't mysterious or complicated when you approach it systematically. It's about understanding basic principles like compound interest, risk management, asset allocation, and cash flow. These concepts become powerful tools when you know how to apply them to your specific situation and goals. The impact of developing financial intelligence extends far beyond just growing your bank account. It gives you confidence in your decisions, reduces anxiety about money, and creates a sense of control over your financial future. You stop being reactive to financial emergencies and start being proactive about financial opportunities. Now, this foundation of financial knowledge becomes even more powerful when you combine it with something most people never consider, but that could multiply your wealth-building potential exponentially. Write in the comments. Financial intelligence matters. If you're committed to developing the money skills that school never taught you, this multiplier that most people never consider is the ability to make clear, strategic decisions when everything around you feels uncertain and the stakes are highest. While financial intelligence gives you the knowledge to build wealth, it's decision-making under pressure that determines whether you can actually capitalize on opportunities when they appear or protect your assets when markets shift. The hidden truth about successful wealth building is that the most important decisions often have to be made when you have incomplete information, limited time, and significant consequences hanging in the balance. This is where most people freeze, overthink, or make emotional choices that cost them dearly. But the builders, the people who consistently create extraordinary results, have developed something most others lack: the ability to stay calm and think clearly when pressure is at its peak. Behind the scenes of every major financial breakthrough, you'll find moments when someone had to make a difficult decision without having all the answers. They had to trust their judgment, analyze available data quickly, and act decisively while others were paralyzed by uncertainty. This skill of emotional regulation combined with rapid strategic thinking is what separates leaders from followers in every industry and every market condition. The transformation happens when you realize that waiting for perfect information is often more dangerous than acting on good information. The people who build lasting wealth understand that indecision is a decision, and it's usually the wrong one. They've trained themselves to gather relevant data quickly, trust their intuition, and move forward even when the path isn't completely clear. But here's something even more fundamental that most people get completely backwards, and this revelation could revolutionize how you approach productivity and performance. Everyone talks about time management, but the real game changer is energy management. You can have all the time in the world, but if your energy is depleted, scattered, or misaligned, that time becomes worthless. The journey from constantly feeling overwhelmed to operating from a place of sustained high performance isn't about finding more hours in your day. It's about protecting and optimizing the energy you bring to those hours. This includes your physical vitality, your mental clarity, your emotional stability, and your spiritual alignment. These aren't just personal wellness concepts. They're foundational business assets that determine the quality of every decision you make and every action you take. Most people treat their energy like it's unlimited, burning through it carelessly, and then wondering why they feel exhausted, unfocused, and unable to perform at their best when it matters most. But when you start treating your energy as your most valuable resource, everything changes. You begin to see that protecting your sleep, managing your stress, and maintaining your health aren't luxuries. They're strategic investments in your capacity to create wealth. The impact of this shift is immediate and profound. When you're operating from a place of high energy, decisions become clearer, creativity flows more freely, and you can sustain peak performance over longer periods. You stop relying on caffeine and adrenaline to get through your days and start building sustainable rhythms that support both productivity and well-being. The transformation happens when you realize that your energy state determines your income state. When you're exhausted, everything feels harder than it is. When you're energized, challenges become manageable, and opportunities become visible. Your energy level directly affects your confidence, your clarity, and your ability to take the bold actions that wealth building requires. Now, this understanding of energy as your primary resource leads us to something that could completely change how you approach leadership, influence, and the ability to create lasting impact in everything you do. Write in the comments, energy before time, if you're ready to prioritize your most valuable resource. This understanding of energy as your primary resource completely changes how you approach leadership and influence. Most people think leadership is about having all the answers, projecting confidence even when you're uncertain, or performing a role that others expect you to play. But authentic leadership, the kind that creates lasting impact and builds genuine wealth, comes from something entirely different. The revelation that transforms everything is realizing that people don't follow performance-based leadership for very long. They can sense when someone is putting on an act, when the confidence is manufactured, or when the vision isn't deeply rooted in genuine conviction. But when you lead from your authentic values and vision, when your leadership flows from who you really are rather than who you think you should be, something magnetic happens. Behind the scenes of every leader who's built something truly lasting, you'll find someone who learned to stop performing leadership and start embodying it. They discovered that authenticity isn't a weakness, it's a competitive advantage. When you're genuinely aligned with your values, when your vision comes from your heart rather than your ego, people sense that authenticity and respond to it in ways that manufactured charisma never achieves. The transformation happens when you realize that trying to be the perfect leader actually makes you a weaker leader. Your struggles, your learning process, your willingness to admit when you don't know something, these human qualities build trust and connection in ways that pretending to have everything figured out never could. Authentic leadership attracts people who are aligned with your actual mission rather than impressed by your performance. This authenticity becomes even more crucial when you consider something that separates those who build lasting success from those whose relevance fades over time. The world is changing faster than ever before. Technology is advancing, markets are shifting, consumer behavior is evolving, and what worked yesterday might be obsolete tomorrow. In this environment, your ability to learn and adapt isn't just helpful, it's essential for survival. The journey of continuous learning and adaptation requires something that many successful people struggle with: maintaining a beginner's mind while building on years of expertise. This is the delicate balance between confidence in your foundational knowledge and humility about what you still need to learn. It's about being secure enough in your abilities to acknowledge when those abilities need upgrading. What separates those who stay relevant from those who become irrelevant isn't their initial knowledge or their early success. It's their willingness to evolve. The most successful people I know are obsessed with learning, not because they feel inadequate, but because they understand that growth is the price of remaining valuable in a changing world. The impact of this continuous learning mindset extends far beyond just staying current with trends. It keeps your thinking fresh, your perspective broad, and your solutions innovative. When you're constantly learning, you're constantly discovering new ways to create value, new approaches to old problems, and new opportunities that others miss because they're stuck in outdated thinking patterns. The transformation happens when learning stops being something you do when you have time and becomes something you prioritize because you understand its strategic importance. You start seeing every conversation as a chance to gain insight, every challenge as a chance to develop new capabilities, every failure as a chance to acquire wisdom that can't be taught in any classroom. Now, this commitment to continuous evolution becomes even more powerful when you understand how to leverage something that most people completely underestimate, but that could be the key to multiplying your efforts exponentially. Write in the comments, "Always learning," if you're committed to staying curious and adaptable in a changing world. This something that most people completely underestimate is the power of delegation and team building. Most entrepreneurs and ambitious individuals fall into the trap of thinking they need to do everything themselves to ensure it's done right. But this mindset becomes the very ceiling that prevents them from scaling beyond their personal capacity. The hidden truth is that your ability to delegate effectively and develop others isn't just about getting more done. It's about multiplying your impact while creating the freedom you're actually working toward. The revelation that changes everything is understanding that delegation isn't about losing control. It's about gaining leverage. When you learn to build systems and develop people who can extend your capabilities, you move from being the bottleneck in your own success to being the architect of scalable growth. Behind the scenes of every person who's built something significant, you'll find someone who learned to trust others with their vision and empower them to execute at a high level. The transformation happens when you realize that trying to do everything yourself isn't dedication, It's limitation. Every task you hold on to that someone else could handle is an opportunity cost. It's time and energy that could be invested in the strategic thinking, relationship building, and creative work that only you can do. When you delegate well, you don't just free up your time, you free up your potential. But here's something that might surprise you about how some of the most innovative solutions and breakthrough approaches are actually created. Most people assume that having unlimited resources, endless time, and complete freedom leads to the best results. But the truth is often the opposite. Limitations, constraints, and boundaries frequently spark more creativity and innovation than abundance ever could. The journey of innovation through constraint forces you to think differently, to find efficient solutions, and to discover approaches that you never would have considered if you had unlimited options. When you're working within boundaries, whether it's a tight budget, a short timeline, or limited resources, your brain shifts into problem-solving mode in ways that abundance doesn't trigger. This paradox of constraint-driven innovation reveals something profound about human creativity. When we have too many options, we often become paralyzed by choice or settle for obvious solutions. But when we're forced to work within specific limitations, we become resourceful. We find ways to do more with less. We discover efficiencies that weren't visible when resources seemed unlimited. The impact of this understanding extends far beyond just business innovation. It changes how you approach challenges in every area of life. Instead of seeing limitations as obstacles, you start seeing them as creative catalysts. Instead of waiting for perfect conditions, you start working brilliantly within imperfect ones. This shift in perspective turns constraints from enemies into allies. The transformation happens when you stop making excuses about what you don't have and start getting creative with what you do have. You realize that some of your best work, your most innovative solutions, and your most efficient systems emerged not despite limitations, but because of them. This understanding gives you confidence to start before you have everything you think you need. Behind the scenes of many breakthrough companies and revolutionary products, you'll find stories of founders who were forced to innovate because they couldn't afford the conventional approach. They had to find creative workarounds, efficient shortcuts, and novel solutions that ultimately became their competitive advantage. Now, this principle of working brilliantly within constraints connects to something even deeper about how emotional intelligence becomes the hidden multiplier that amplifies every other skill you develop. Write in the comments, "Constraints create innovation." If you're ready to stop waiting for perfect conditions and start working brilliantly with what you have. This hidden multiplier that amplifies every other skill you develop is emotional intelligence, and it's probably the most undervalued competitive advantage in business today. Most people focus on technical skills, industry knowledge, and strategic thinking, but they completely overlook the ability to understand and manage emotions, both their own and others. This oversight costs them dearly in negotiations, leadership situations, and relationship building. The revelation that changes everything is understanding that business is fundamentally about human connection, and human connection is driven by emotion more than logic. You can have the best product, the most compelling data, and the strongest argument, but if you can't read the room, manage your own emotional state, or connect with others on an emotional level, you'll struggle to create the influence and impact you're capable of. Take Lisa Rodriguez, a 41-year-old entrepreneur from Miami, who built a multi-million-dollar consulting firm not because she was the smartest person in her industry, but because she developed exceptional emotional intelligence. She learned to stay calm under pressure, read people's underlying motivations, and navigate complex interpersonal dynamics that derailed many of her technically superior competitors. This skill became her secret weapon in closing deals, building teams, and creating lasting partnerships. Behind the scenes of every major business success, you'll find someone who understands that people make decisions based on how they feel, then justify those decisions with logic afterward. When you can influence how people feel by making them feel heard, understood, valued, and confident, you gain an advantage that pure technical competence can never provide. The transformation happens when you realize that emotional intelligence isn't soft skills, its strategic capability. Your ability to regulate your own emotions under stress directly affects the quality of your decisions. Your ability to understand others' emotional states allows you to communicate more effectively, negotiate more successfully, and lead more inspiringly. These capabilities compound every other skill you possess. But here's where most people get emotional intelligence wrong, and understanding this distinction will save you from a common trap that undermines long-term success. They think being emotionally intelligent means being emotionally reactive, changing direction every time circumstances shift or feedback comes in. But real emotional intelligence includes something most people miss: the ability to maintain clear long-term vision while staying flexible in your short-term tactics. The journey of building lasting wealth and impact requires this delicate balance between conviction and adaptability. You need to be absolutely certain about your destination, while remaining completely flexible about your route. This prevents both the rigid thinking that makes you miss opportunities and the aimless wandering that wastes years pursuing tactics that don't serve your larger vision. The impact of this balanced approach is profound because it allows you to stay grounded in purpose while remaining responsive to reality. When market conditions change, when strategies don't work as planned, when unexpected obstacles appear, you can pivot quickly without losing sight of where you're ultimately headed. You become like water, maintaining your essential nature while adapting to any container. The transformation happens when you realize that flexibility in methods doesn't mean uncertainty in outcomes. You can be absolutely committed to your long-term vision while being completely willing to experiment with different approaches to get there. This combination of clarity and adaptability is what allows you to navigate uncertainty without panic and adjust course without losing momentum. Now, this balance between vision and flexibility becomes even more powerful when you understand how to leverage something that most people completely ignore, but that could transform how effectively you serve others and scale your influence. Write in the comments, vision steady, tactics flexible, if you're committed to maintaining long-term direction while adapting your approach based on what you learn. This something that most people completely ignore is the difference between building what you think people need and building what they actually need. Most entrepreneurs and business builders fall into the trap of creating solutions based on their own assumptions, their own experiences, or what seems logical to them. But this inside-out approach to value creation is why so many businesses struggle to find customers who are truly excited about what they're offering. The revelation that transforms everything is realizing that sustainable wealth comes from becoming obsessed with your customers' real problems, rather than falling in love with your own solutions. When you shift from assumption-based building to customer-centric value creation, you stop trying to convince people they need what you've made and start creating things they're already desperately seeking. Behind the scenes of every business that seems to effortlessly attract customers and generate consistent revenue, you'll find someone who invested deeply in understanding genuine market pain points. They didn't just ask people what they wanted. They observed what people actually struggled with, what kept them up at night, what they were already trying to solve with imperfect alternatives. The transformation happens when you realize that your personal assumptions about what's valuable are often completely wrong. What feels obvious or easy to you might be exactly what others find difficult and are willing to pay to solve. What seems like a small inconvenience to you might be a major frustration for your market. This shift in perspective opens up opportunities that assumption-based thinking completely misses. The journey of building customer-centric value requires you to get uncomfortably close to the people you serve. You have to listen more than you speak, observe more than you assume, and test more than you theorize. This process is humbling because it often reveals that your initial ideas need significant adjustment, but it's also liberating because it gives you confidence that you're building something people actually want. But here's where this customer-centric approach becomes exponentially more powerful, and this is something that could completely transform how you scale your impact while preserving your time and energy. The strategic use of technology allows you to amplify your human capabilities rather than replace your human judgment. Most people get this backwards. They either resist technology completely or they try to automate everything, including the things that require personal touch. The hidden truth about successful scaling is that technology should handle the routine, repetitive tasks that drain your bandwidth while preserving your time and energy for the creative, strategic, and relationship-building work that only you can do. When you use automation strategically, you're not becoming less human. You're becoming more human by focusing on the distinctly human elements of your work. This approach to technology leverage is profound because it allows you to serve more people without sacrificing quality or personal connection. You can automate the scheduling, the follow-ups, the basic information delivery, and the routine processes while investing your personal attention in the conversations, decisions, and creative solutions that create real value. The transformation happens when you stop seeing technology as a replacement for human effort and start seeing it as an amplifier of human impact. You realize that the goal isn't to eliminate yourself from your business, but to eliminate yourself from the parts of your business that don't require your unique gifts, insights, and judgment. Now, this strategic approach to leveraging technology while maintaining human connection leads us to something that could be the key to making smart decisions about risk and opportunity in an uncertain world. Write in the comments, human judgment plus smart automation, if you're ready to use technology to amplify rather than replace your unique capabilities. This key to making smart decisions about risk and opportunity is something most people never develop, and it's the difference between bold moves that create breakthrough results and reckless chances that destroy years of progress. Most people approach risk from one of two extremes. They either avoid it completely out of fear, or they dive in without proper evaluation and end up making costly mistakes that could have been prevented. The revelation that changes everything is understanding that risk assessment isn't about playing it safe or taking wild gambles. It's about developing the skill to evaluate opportunities based on both data and intuition, allowing you to make calculated moves that drive growth without exposing yourself to catastrophic loss. This balance between boldness and wisdom is what separates successful builders from those who either stagnate or self-destruct. Behind the scenes of every major business success, you'll find someone who learned to assess risk intelligently. They don't avoid risk, they manage it. They gather relevant information, consider potential outcomes, evaluate their ability to handle worst-case scenarios, and then make informed decisions that push them forward without putting everything they've built in jeopardy. The transformation happens when you realize that the biggest risk is often not taking any risk at all. Playing it completely safe in a changing world is actually a recipe for being left behind. But this doesn't mean being reckless. It means being strategic about where you place your bets, how much you're willing to risk, and what safety nets you have in place if things don't go as planned. The journey of developing risk evaluation skills requires you to become comfortable with uncertainty while still making decisive moves. You learn to distinguish between intelligent risks that could accelerate your progress and foolish risks that could derail everything you've worked for. This discernment becomes a competitive advantage because it allows you to seize opportunities that others are too afraid to pursue while avoiding traps that others fall into. But here's where risk management becomes exponentially more powerful, and this might be the most important skill we'll discuss because it amplifies every other capability you've developed. Your ability to clearly communicate your ideas and influence others determines how effectively your vision translates into reality. All the strategic thinking, financial intelligence, and innovative solutions in the world mean nothing if you can't get others to understand, support, and act on your ideas. The hidden truth about success is that it's rarely a solo achievement. Whether you're building a business, leading a team, or creating any kind of meaningful change, your results will ultimately depend on your ability to enroll others in your vision. This requires more than just having good ideas. It requires the skill to articulate those ideas in ways that resonate, inspire, and motivate action. Communication and influence aren't just helpful additions to your skill set. They're multipliers that amplify everything else you bring to the table. When you can clearly explain complex concepts, paint compelling pictures of possibility, and connect with people on both logical and emotional levels, you suddenly have access to resources, opportunities, and support that would otherwise remain out of reach. The transformation happens when you realize that influence isn't about manipulation or persuasion tricks. It's about becoming so clear in your own thinking that you can help others see what you see. It's about caring enough about your message to invest in delivering it effectively. It's about understanding that great ideas that can't be communicated clearly are effectively worthless ideas. Now, this mastery of communication and influence becomes the foundation for something that could ensure your long-term financial security, regardless of economic conditions or market changes. Write in the comments, smart risks, clear communication, if you're committed to developing both the wisdom to evaluate opportunities and the skills to influence outcomes. This foundation for long-term financial security is something that most people never build, because they rely on willpower and good intentions instead of systematic automation. They tell themselves they'll save more next month, invest when they have extra money, or track their expenses when they have more time. But this manual approach to wealth building is why most people struggle financially despite earning decent incomes. The revelation that changes everything is understanding that wealth is built through consistency, not heroic efforts. The people who accumulate substantial financial assets don't do it through massive windfalls or perfect timing. They do it through automated systems that work regardless of their mood, motivation, or memory. They've removed their own psychology from the equation by building structures that handle the fundamentals automatically. Take James Thompson, a 33-year-old software engineer from Seattle, who was earning a solid six-figure income but had almost nothing to show for it. He was living paycheck to paycheck despite making more money than most people ever will. The transformation happened when he stopped trying to manage his money manually and started building automated systems for saving, investing, and expense management. Behind the scenes of James's wealth-building journey was a simple but powerful realization. He couldn't trust himself to make the right financial decisions consistently, so he removed himself from most of those decisions. He automated transfers to his savings account, set up automatic investments that happened before he could spend the money, and created systems that tracked his expenses without requiring daily attention. The transformation happens when you realize that financial discipline isn't about having perfect self-control. It's about designing your environment so that good decisions happen automatically. When your savings happen before you see the money, when your investments occur without your active involvement, when your expenses are tracked without your daily input, you build wealth through structure rather than struggle. But here's something that makes these financial systems exponentially more powerful, and this is what separates those who make good decisions from those who make great decisions consistently. The development of mental models and frameworks improves the quality of your thinking across every area of life, not just finances. These cognitive tools become your decision-making infrastructure. The journey of building better thinking frameworks is about recognizing that your brain, while amazing, has predictable biases and limitations. It gets overwhelmed by complexity, influenced by emotions, and confused by too many variables. But when you develop mental models, structured ways of thinking about common problems and situations, you create clarity where there was once confusion. Mental models are like having a toolkit for your mind. Just as you wouldn't try to build a house with only a hammer, you shouldn't try to navigate complex decisions with only one way of thinking. When you have multiple frameworks for evaluating opportunities, assessing risks, understanding human behavior, and analyzing information, you make better choices because you can see situations from multiple angles. The impact of this cognitive infrastructure extends far beyond just business or financial decisions. It affects how you approach relationships, how you solve problems, how you learn new skills, and how you adapt to changing circumstances. These thinking tools become the foundation for wisdom that compounds over time. The transformation happens when you stop making decisions based purely on intuition or emotion and start applying structured thinking to important choices. You begin to recognize patterns, anticipate consequences, and evaluate options more systematically. This doesn't eliminate creativity or intuition. It supports them with better reasoning. Now, this foundation of systematic thinking And automated financial management leads us to something that could be the most important decision you make about your health and your long-term capacity to build wealth. Write in the comments, systems over willpower, if you're ready to build automated structures that create wealth through consistency, rather than hoping good intentions will be enough. This most important decision about your health and long-term capacity to build wealth is something that most ambitious people get completely backwards. They treat their physical and mental health as something they'll focus on later, after they've achieved their financial goals, built their business, or reached some arbitrary milestone. But this backwards thinking is actually sabotaging their ability to achieve those very goals they're sacrificing their health for. The revelation that changes everything is understanding that your health isn't a personal luxury you indulge in when you have time. It's a business asset that determines your capacity to perform at the level your ambitions require. Your energy, your mental clarity, your emotional stability, your ability to handle stress and make good decisions under pressure. All of this flows directly from your physical and mental health foundation. Behind the scenes of every person who sustains high performance over decades, rather than burning out in a few years, you'll find someone who learned to treat their health as infrastructure, not indulgence. They understand that the quality of their sleep affects the quality of their decisions. They know that their nutrition impacts their energy levels, which impacts their productivity, which impacts their income potential. The transformation happens when you realize that taking care of your health isn't taking time away from building wealth. It's investing in your capacity to build wealth more effectively and sustainably. When you have consistent energy, mental clarity, and emotional resilience, every other area of your life improves. Your work quality increases, your relationships deepen, your decision-making sharpens. The journey of treating health as a strategic asset requires you to stop seeing exercise, proper nutrition, and stress management as things you should do when you have time and start seeing them as things you must do to have the capacity to achieve what you're working toward. This shift in perspective makes health investments feel logical rather than optional. But here's something that might surprise you about how the most successful people approach wealth building. And this principle could completely transform your relationship with abundance. The people who create lasting wealth understand that giving and contribution aren't things you do after you've accumulated enough. They're actually part of the process of accumulating it. Generosity creates abundance cycles that benefit everyone involved. Most people approach wealth with a scarcity mindset, believing they need to hoard resources, information, and opportunities until they feel secure. But this hoarding mentality actually blocks the flow of abundance. When you're generous with your knowledge, your connections, and your resources, you create a gravitational pull that attracts opportunities, relationships, and resources back to you in ways that selfish accumulation never could. The hidden truth about sustainable wealth building is that it's fundamentally about circulation, not accumulation. Money, opportunities, and value must flow to grow. When you contribute generously to others' success, you become someone others want to support, collaborate with, and include in opportunities. This isn't karma or mystical thinking, it's practical relationship dynamics. The transformation happens when you shift from asking, "What can I get?" to asking, "What can I give?" This doesn't mean being naive or giving away everything you have. It means understanding that strategic generosity creates compound returns that pure self-interest never generates. When you help others succeed, they remember. When you share valuable insights freely, you build trust and credibility that translates into business opportunities. Now, this philosophy of contribution and abundance connects them to something that could ensure your continued growth and relevance throughout your entire career, regardless of how industries change or markets evolve. Write in the comments, "Health is wealth infrastructure," if you're ready to treat your physical and mental well-being as the foundation for all other success. This something that could ensure your continued growth and relevance is a mindset that most people abandon the moment they achieve initial success. They reach a certain level of income, build a functioning business, or establish a comfortable routine, and then they stop improving. They think they've figured it out, that they can coast on what got them there. But this is exactly when stagnation sets in, and stagnation is the enemy of lasting wealth. The revelation that separates those who build sustainable success from those who peak and plateau is the continuous optimization mindset. This isn't about constantly changing everything or chasing every new trend. It's about regular review and refinement of your systems, strategies, and approaches to prevent stagnation and accelerate progress. It's about treating your life and business like a high-performance vehicle that requires ongoing maintenance and upgrades to operate at peak capacity. Behind the scenes of every person who continues growing long after their initial breakthrough, you'll find someone who's obsessed with incremental improvement. They track their results religiously, gather feedback consistently, and make small adjustments that compound over time. They understand that what got them to their current level may not be sufficient to reach the next one. The transformation happens when you realize that optimization isn't just about business metrics. It applies to every system in your life: your morning routine, your decision-making process, your relationship patterns, your learning approach, your health habits. When you apply the optimization mindset across all areas, you create compound improvements that accelerate everything you're building. The journey of continuous optimization requires you to embrace discomfort because improvement often means acknowledging what isn't working, even when it's been working well enough. It means being willing to experiment, measure results, and adjust course based on what you discover rather than what you hope or assume. But now I want to go even deeper into something that elevates all of this from personal success to profound significance. There's a perspective that transforms how you approach every decision, every project, every relationship, and every goal. It's the shift from building for yourself to building with future generations in mind, creating work that outlasts your individual lifetime. Legacy and impact consciousness isn't about waiting until you're older to think about your legacy. It's about recognizing that everything you build today is either contributing to a better future or merely serving your immediate needs. This perspective elevates your daily decisions from personal benefit to broader contribution, creating meaning that transcends material success. When you build with future generations in mind, your work takes on a different quality. Your business becomes a platform for positive change. Your wealth becomes a tool for enabling others. Your knowledge becomes a gift you're stewarding for those who come after you. This shift in perspective doesn't diminish your personal success. It amplifies it by connecting it to something larger than yourself. The hidden truth about this legacy-focused approach is that it actually accelerates your personal success because it attracts people who want to be part of something meaningful. Customers, partners, team members, and investors are drawn to leaders who are building for reasons that extend beyond their own benefit. Purpose-driven work creates deeper engagement, stronger loyalty, and more sustainable results. The transformation happens when you stop asking, "What's in it for me?" and start asking, "What's in it for the future?" This doesn't mean sacrificing your own goals. It means aligning your goals with a contribution that matters beyond your own lifetime. Write in the comments, "Building for future generations," if you're ready to elevate your work from personal success to lasting legacy. If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who understands that building wealth isn't just about making money. It's about designing a life that reflects your deepest values while creating something that matters. The fact that you stayed with me through all of these concepts tells me you're serious about transformation, not just information. Everything we've explored today, from breaking free of inevitable thinking to building systems that work while you sleep, from developing authentic leadership to creating legacy-minded impact, these aren't just theories. They're the actual blueprints that separate those who dream from those who build, those who hope from those who achieve. I create content like this because I believe there are people out there who are ready to stop settling for ordinary results and start creating extraordinary ones. If that resonates with you, I'd love to have you join this community by subscribing to the channel. The conversations we have here go deep into the strategies, mindsets, and frameworks that actually move the needle in building wealth and designing a life of meaning. And if this message landed for you, if something shifted while you were listening, leave a comment that says, "This message was meant for me." I read every single comment, And knowing that these ideas are connecting with people who are ready to implement them makes all the difference. Hit the like button if you felt that connection throughout our conversation today. It helps more people discover these ideas, and honestly, it lets me know that the time invested in creating this content is reaching the right audience. There's a video right here that dives even deeper into the practical steps for implementing these wealth-building principles in your daily life. It's the perfect complement to what we just covered. Click and continue with me over there. Let's keep building something extraordinary together.